Good morning, everybody. Whoa. Oh, I've always wanted to do that in an amphitheater. Okay. So I hear that the theme this month is action. So what would action be without you guys doing something? So we're going to start with you. Everybody stand up. No, that was just for me. So we're going to start with find a partner, pair up. If you're a lonely one, then you can maybe join it for a third. But pair up. You could have come with that person, know that person, not know that person. Doesn't matter. Just grab a partner. When you have that partner, grab their hand and raise their hand up in the air so I know you have it. Let's get awkward. Awesome. Okay. You can put it down and stop touching each other. Now, inside your own mind, think of the deepest, darkest secret you have, something that you perhaps have the most shame around that would have you isolated alone. If anybody ever knew, if you're weird enough to not have one of those, then maybe think of your deepest fear sort of preventing you from living life in the way that you would. Is that inside? Everyone got it? I see a lot of awkward-looking faces, so I'm pretty sure you guys are there. Okay, so now with your partner, you're going to share this secret or this fear. But wait, hold on. I see people leaving already. Before you do that, we're not going to use human words. Some of the prompts, you guys got them for the icebreaker, but it's what's your favorite animal noise. You're going to communicate this fear or this secret in the form of some animal noise to each other. Just bear with me. All right, so it could be a cat, it could be a dog, as a pig, whatever. But you're gonna do it for about 15 seconds, and just as much as you can, actually try to think of yourself sharing this thing in this way. It's okay to feel completely uncomfortable right now. All right, we're gonna go 15 seconds apiece. Turn to your partner. And the one standing on my left is the first person to go. Go. Okay, number one complete. You guys are awesome. All right, number two, go. Oh, I see hugs happening. You guys are amazing. Okay, just for the sake of there's a couple thirds, let's give the third to get it off their chest too. So the third person go. And everyone else listen. Go! Okay, you guys are wonderful. Give everyone a round of applause. You're all here for my amusement. Okay, you guys can sit down. That was amazing. Who felt that who was uncomfortable? Who actually tried to convey their thing in that way? Anybody? Yeah? Did anybody laugh? You know what I love about kids is they don't even get the awkward look on their faces. They just do it. They just have this like immediate sense of being themselves, as goofy and raw and weird as that may be. They don't have to like work to try to be vulnerable or authentic or creative. They just are. And I feel like us as human beings, as we start to experience hurt and judgment, pain, we start to layer on our shells. Our shells start to get thicker. The space between adults are ex-babies, ultimately. So we have this like inner essence where we kind of start and we build out from here, and then this is kind of how we interact with the world and we're faced with. And for us, we're storytellers, we're problem solvers, And so it's important for us to understand the essence of these individuals that we're trying to connect with and meet their needs of. And it can sometimes be really difficult when you meet that surface or the masks that they wear head on. You don't necessarily know the person that you're connecting with, despite what they may say or project. You ask somebody what their needs are, a lot of people don't even know how to identify and communicate their needs. And there's something really interesting about the masks that we wear. Instead of trying to drill directly into that defensive shell to get to the essence of that person, I try to find ways to create experiences that allow their natural selves to emerge. And there's a really great quote from Oscar Wilde that if I try to remember, I'm going to butcher, but it had to do with masks. He says, "A man is least himself when speaking in his own person. Give a man a mask and he'll finally tell you the truth." And I heard that and I started thinking about a time in which I remembered putting on a mask and a side of myself that emerged. I'm driving up to this parking lot. I've driven by this building 100 times before and I've never stopped. And I pulled up and I look up and it's the University of Washington Coliseum for their basketball games. And my hands were super clammy, my stomach clenched, full of anxiety and anticipation. My friend Amanda reaches over, she's like, "Kyle, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna do great. It's gonna be over before you know it." We walk up to the front door, greeted by this really nice woman, brings us inside, chaperones us around the building, and it's empty, dark. You can hear every single footstep echoing down the hallway. We make our way to the employees-only door, opens up. We go downstairs, longer, darker hallway. Up on the left is this glowing doorway. We step into it. We're greeted by all these really smiling faces. There's a couple models. There's a couple representatives from the University of Washington, from the promotional agency that hired us, and from Geico, the insurance company. And we sit down, and one of the representatives is like, "Well, thank you, everybody, for coming in. We're going to talk about a few logistics and get on our way." And as he starts talking, I look over, and I see this oddly shaped black bag, and I'm like, "That's for me." And I've got that little butthole pucker thing, and I started thinking about, like, how in the hell did I get myself into this situation? And a few weeks prior was the Obama inauguration, January 2009. And I knew that because I was a toy developer at Funko and had just made Obama bobbleheads and was at my buddy's bar just selling these things left and right and waiting for my buddy to get off work, and his friend Amanda comes in, and we start hitting it off, talking, and she says by the end of the night, she's like, "You know, I'm working on this thing I think you'd be a really interesting fit for. Do you want to be the Geico Gecko mascot for the upcoming basketball game?" Yes. Yes. Now, at any other point in my life, I would have been like, 100 reasons as to why I couldn't or shouldn't. But being as though I had just separated from a very tumultuous 5-year relationship, just moved out of the main bedroom, down into the basement, underneath the stairs, in a very Harry Potter-like situation. I was staying on this inflatable mattress with this little space heater, and it was snowing outside, and I was just reading book after book, trying to keep my mind occupied, not thinking about the whole situation, not thinking about where she might be. And I was reading The Alchemist, the book about being able to identify any and all of the opportunities around us at any given time and how you step into them and say yes, or you're aware of them, and just say yes, yes. And so it was the turn of the new year, and so my resolution was to just say yes to anything that presented itself towards me. Little did I know it'd be a Geico Gecko mascot. And so now I'm sitting back in this room, and he says, "So who's my gecko?" And I was like, "Great, stand up." And so he starts, putting this thing on me. It's this big, furry, white and green costume with the purple Huskies jersey and these furry hands and big foam feet and this giant foam head that had fans inside, because apparently you can suffocate in one of these things. And I put it on, and I found myself falling backward, and it has a giant 4-foot tail. And so I start walking around to get a little accustomed to this thing, and walking out the hallway and walk by this full-length mirror, and I stop, and I'm like, there's a giant lizard staring back at me. I give it a little wave, and it waves back at me, and I give it a little shimmy, and it shimmies back at me, and I start to twirl. You get the idea. And so we made our way up to the basketball court, and we're getting the rest of the layout of the afternoon. And he's like, you're going to run up and down the stairs, and you're going to grab people from the audience, and we're going to keep the energy high, and we're going to do the halftime show, and da-da-da-da-da. So now I'm running up and down these stairs, trying not to fall, and all of a sudden you start to hear the doors open and people making their way into the Coliseum. Game time. We go out there, you start seeing the first smiling faces coming in, kind of walk out there, and you're like, give a little wave, and you see a couple waves, and you do a little shimmy, and you see people start to laugh, and all of a sudden it's just this rush of activity, excitement of laughter, of fun, people grabbing you, taking photos with you. I find myself like smiling inside the mask as if people could see me, and all of a sudden this like ghost flies by me. I'm like, is that Mr. Cash? You don't forget Mr. Cash. Mr. Cash was my principal in junior high. And given as though I was one of the worst kids in the entire school district and spent a lot of time in Mr. Cash's office and seeing him, he was an ex-military boot camp instructor who had spent decades perfecting that military glare into your soul while slapping his bulldog cheeks with his flavorless gum. And I swear to God, he had these thick yellow fingernails that would just tap rhythmically and hypnotically on his desk. You don't forget Mr. Cash. He was intimidating. You didn't want to be seen by Mr. Cash. But I saw him, and I ran up to him, and I tapped him on the shoulder, and he turns around. I'm like, Mr. Cash. And he just like, as if a giant lizard was staring at him, talking to him. And he kind of nodded. I'm like, you were my principal in junior high. He's like, I'm like, Redmond Junior High. He's like, oh, yeah, I was there. It's like, I just wanted to run over and say hello and let you know I didn't die after all. All right, take care. Turn around, kind of walk away. He's like, all right. Realized I didn't really give him my name. Then the game started. Hilarity ensues. Run up and down the stairs, like grabbing, doing all the activities. Halftime ends. For us, show's over. We walk downstairs. Energy is super high amongst the promotional team. Oh my God, did you see that? The kids felt like they knew you. They just ran up and give you hugs, and you were dancing and flailing. You almost knocked the tray over, the guy's food. Oh my God, that was awesome. You were great. Get back in the room. Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. Gonna have to have that soup back now. Really? Do you have to? I feel like for the first time since my relationship, since I was a kid, really, that I felt free. Free to be me. There's something really powerful about the masks that we wear. You know, you see it in the anonymity through YouTube. You see it with the culture of superheroes these days. And we all wear these masks and embody these different people. Now, my first company I started, it's about 5.5 years ago. It's called Giant Thinkwell. And then Haiku Deck. When we first started, we had no idea what we were doing. Completely winging it. We'd come up with this brilliant idea, lock ourselves in the room, build it, orchestrate this incredible launch. If there's one thing we really did right, it was noise. And then it would fail. Okay, try to figure out why it failed. Let's try something else. So we'd come up with a new idea and build it and launch it and fail. And we started to get really frustrated. Our investors started to get really frustrated. And with each fail became very emotional and contentious within the team, trying to figure out, like, what the hell are we doing wrong? We're smart people. The products are beautiful and well built. I don't get it. And as we didn't get it and we tried to intellectualize the whole situation, just did a lot of this within amongst the team. And before you know it, like, we ended up in founders therapy. It's a thing. I would, not going to unleash that demon. Just kidding. So after walking away, team implodes. Number one reason, by the way, why most startups fail is inner team workings. So I walked away, and a week later, I started Freakin' Genius. And I really stopped to turn the lens inward and figure out, what did we do wrong? Like, what was I personally doing wrong? What were we missing? And started to think about different tools and processes just around communication. Simple communication, daily, weekly, sprints, stand-ups, digestions, team lunches, like really fundamental human ways of bringing ourselves to work and allowing that space in a way that help cut off issues and stay aligned and ultimately build a culture of trust. And this became a rhythm that built a really strong internal structure. But then taking this thought of learning and communication out onto the streets before we had product ideas, and really starting to learn about the needs of the people around us. And starting to learn to ask questions. Now, when we first started this, it felt very much like focus grouping and surveys and trying to validate specific directions and ideas ahead of time. Once I took a step back and kind of put my ego to the side and started going out, I tried to start asking the dumbest questions I could and really putting on the dumbest ears that I could. And even if I thought I understood what I was hearing, I would still ask the dumb questions. One of the biggest things that helped in communicating ideas is I'll take my ideas and I'll pitch it to a 5th grader and I'll pitch it to some Luddite grandmother. And if I can get both ranges to understand what I'm saying, to get excited about what I'm saying, to want what I'm saying, and then to be able to communicate what I'm saying, puts you on a pretty good path. And so we started learning that learning process until we started nailing that sort of response every single time. And we ended up building a product to give people masks. You know, use any photo, bring it to life as animation using your voice. But you can be anyone, say anything, just harking back to that mascot experience. So we're like, we put it in front of people, people would explode in that whole surprise and delight thing that we look for. And we thought we'd really built something special. And we also, everything had to be Ashwin approved. Ashwin was this little 6-year-old who came to a startup weekend who gave the most adorable but a very effective pitch and worked on his team. And he would come in, and I was doing a little bit of mentoring with this kid, and he'd come in. I just bought this kid a big mound of Play-Doh, and he runs, and he's like, oh my God, Play-Doh, and he rips open the thing, he starts mashing it around. After a couple minutes, he's like, I don't know what to make. And then he sees the box, and there's the ice cream truck, and next to it's a picture of the pieces that it takes to make the ice cream truck. He's like, oh, let's make that. And he starts mashing around his Play-Doh and creating the shapes and just, oh, no. Oh, yeah. And I just watched this creative process happen, and it hit me. I'm like, wait a second. We built Play-Doh. Super fun, easy to use, simple utility. But we were really missing the inspiration. People kept hitting this wall of, what do I make? What do I make? And so in watching this, through this kid's experience, I'll suck less, I promise. So watching this kid's experience, we built the product to reflect the inspiration, and all of a sudden, we saw a huge increase in the success of the product. And I started thinking more about, how do we create experiences where people naturally emerge, and the way that you look at them, you can pull from it. And sometimes, so one tactic that I use is sometimes if I'm sitting down with individuals and want to get their stories, their problems, or their ideas, I'll have them write it down on an underlined piece of paper, and I'll take that paper, and it's not that I'm necessarily reading what they're communicating, I'm reading how they're communicating it. I've been doing graphology for over a decade, studying the traits of handwriting and signature, and so I'm looking at, is there an unusual amount of space between this word and this word, which means that they're creating a little bit of separation or getting closer to this idea? Does their slant kind of start from being back here and then they lean forward and become emotionally attached to this idea? Are they stabbing their O's, A's, or P's to have a little bit of inauthenticity with what they're communicating here? Or are they just lying throughout their whole piece? So there's hundreds and hundreds of traits that people can communicate in that way. Or physiognomy, the study of micro-expressions and the formation of your facial features to communicate who you are and how you are in the world. Another great experience that I've had is actually from the frustrations that I've had in most networking events and conferences and talks, where I feel like surrounded by amazing people that have incredible wealth of ideas, depth. They've overcome extreme challenges, things that we could really learn from each other, people that we might know that help facilitate each other. But the environments, a lot of times, just don't really facilitate that sort of authentic, genuine human connection. And so we came up with an idea called Peloton, adventure-based networking. And we just ran the second one, where we did a week of hiking, biking, paragliding, paintballing, all sorts of hiking to 12,000 feet in the middle of the snow, almost getting lost in a cabin. But really not creating a space where people have to talk about themselves, but they can just be themselves, and you can learn all sorts about who that person is, how they handle their struggle, how they emerge in tense situations. Just kind of bringing it all back, I think a lot about how do we remove these emotional and technical barriers to unleashing the genius, to ultimately allowing ourselves to be better versions of ourselves, be better teammates, better partners, build better products, solve bigger problems. That's all I got. Happy to answer questions. Questions, or are we off to the day? Yes. It's a great question. To help solve that specific thing, I was working on a product called Friend Brag, because what ultimately helps communicate you more than you is the people that support you. So if I'm working on something that I feel is really meaningful, I'll use a little bit of that like reciprocity cash that I have and ask people to share for me. Otherwise, just using the normal channels and trying to create as much noise and be as weird as I can. I think a lot about the story and the narrative that kind of puts that thing in context. You know, if there's a specific video that I want people to see, is it just that I want them to see the video, or can they have an experience around the video, and it's kind of the punchline to something a little more narrative? I don't know if that answers your question, but. So the question was, what sorts of tools, processes do I use to maintain a culture? It's a great question. So as a quick overview, we would have our quick 15-minute-a-day stand-ups where we talk about our last 24 hours of the tasks that we accomplished, next 24-hour parking lot, mad, sad, glad, afraid, and in, a space for people to emotionally represent themselves. So that was like a spoken communication thing. Use a lot of Trello. Use Trello for everything in my life. We used 15.5, which allows a series of questions and people to answer questions, things like, you know, what are you most proud of this week? What are your top 5 things accomplished? What's the best thing that happened in your personal life this week? What's the worst thing that happened in your personal life this week? Just some people communicate more in person better. Some people are more comfortable behind the screen, developers. And so tools like that, we'll do our weekly team lunches where it's a little more personal and we hold each other accountable to like personal goals that we have. Like I need to go to the dentist, so now I'm getting messages from people I work with. Just the way that we use sprint planning and digest what our goals, tasks are. We do a thing called Perfect Week, just a variety of tools. And I'm happy to talk further to that. And one of the big things that I do in getting myself into a project or a friendship or a relationship is try to do a deep dive and ask the questions that normally don't get asked. So I'll run workshops for early stage founders that are just sort of forming. Because when you first meet somebody, you know, we get a quick take on their story and who they are. But there's still a huge gap to who that person actually is and who I am actually, and what our intentions are and how aligned we are. And so wherever there's a gap, we project ourselves into it and we make all sorts of assumptions. So I ask a series of deepening questions that shorten that gap. And I've had teams say, hey, thank you so much. That was awesome. We decided to split up and part ways now rather than a year from now. So that's kind of like the preemptive thing I'll do. I saw another hand. Anybody else? Yeah. No, they're not secret. I haven't put together a blog post. Maybe this will be sold to the woman in the purple or blue. I can't see the suns of my eyes. Drugs. Oh, sorry, what? Finish the question. God, I hope that's not true. How do I stay weird? I don't know how to answer that question. I've never been asked that question before. Thank you. Growth opportunity. Anybody else? Ask the hard questions. That was a hard one. That actually stumped me. Ooh, I ask this question all the time. How do I know when to quit? I'm pretty bad at quitting things where I know that I'll have trouble sleeping at night if 6 months down the road I've moved past it. I'm like, oh my God. So I was in, here's one great example, personal. I was in this relationship a while ago, and as I stepped into being an entrepreneur and trying to deal with being present, but also carving my way out into this unknown, it was really difficult and ultimately ended up separating. But then I started freaking genius and started applying sprints and these communication tools and everything else. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait, damn, if I only had this, if I only ran my relationship like with sprints and postmortems and, so I'm like, wait, I got to try again. We tried it. It actually worked really well for a long time until we stopped doing it. So I have a really hard time quitting if there are ideas that emerge of different ways I can see the problem. Because usually the thing that I get myself into is something I have a lot of conviction around. If I don't and it's just kind of whatever, I'll quit sooner. But I don't find myself surrounding myself with those sorts of situations. So actually, in terms of quitting, people around me that I give perspective to, and they kind of get to see the overall story unfold, and they have a fresher perspective that I rely on for their perspective. Sounding boards, find amazing people that you admire as sounding boards, take it all in as data, make your own decisions, but having outside perspective really helps keep me grounded. And then how do I know? How do I know when to start? That happens almost immediately. It's a lot of, bye Dexter, I love you. It starts a lot of 4 o'clock in the morning, have an initial idea, and I know that if it doesn't come out in some way, I'll usually lose the essence of it, so I usually start prototyping at any given time of the day, at least to where I can see it in front of me and I can communicate it in front of me, and then just start gauging responses based on that. If it starts to fall flat or I'm having a really hard time getting to the next level, then I realize, like, it was the essence of something, but it might not have the longevity. But I'm really impulsive and impatient on ideas. I have to get them out as quick as possible. So, well, thank you, everybody. Oh, yeah, one more question. The difference between persistence, perseverance, stubbornness, and ignorance. Yeah. I'll get accused of being stubborn more than I'll be accused of being ignorant. But again, I think it just comes down to conviction, because that's ultimately my fuel. Because any of the things that I'm trying to solve are layered, and they need time to incubate, and they're big. And I don't expect that it's just I'm going to get there and it's going to be an easy ride up. Like, just kind of set the expectation. I'm going to have 30 nights of, crying, curled up, naked and alone and just expecting that that's going to happen. So when it does happen, I can walk over and check that one off my list and just whittle it down to 0. But I know that the hardship, ultimately, like some of the biggest hardships I've faced in those deepest, darkest moments is kind of what, it's like you're an archaeological dig. You know, the lower that you get, sometimes like the unfound gem is pretty buried, so you have to go pretty low to unearth it. So I allow myself to go low and and I think that's ultimately what it is to be an entrepreneur, is like living this high dynamic range, not sort of this like central strip of, you know, normality, but allowing myself to, because with the lowest lows, I get the highest highs. That also comes with it. Sometimes they happen simultaneously and they're rapidly shifting, and it's very chaotic. So don't ever ask me, how's it going? But I don't know, man. Just find the fuel. I think ultimately, just what fuel are you being driven by? Is it something very personal to your own sense of identity? And if it is something that you need to see in the world, like just go with that, because that's going to be the thing that allows you to be persistent until you start making everybody else cry around you continuously. Then you're being stubborn. One more. What decision did I make that I even surprised myself? That's a great one. Last August, I packed up and moved my life down to Las Vegas after having gone there a number of times, meeting with investors down there every single time, whether because of the food poisoning or the heat stroke or the whatever, saying there's no way in hell I'll ever move down here. I'm not a Vegas type person. And then ultimately, for the sake of doing everything that I possibly can to make what I'm doing a success and fulfill my promises to my investors, I threw this Hail Mary and just kind of went with it and moved my whole life down there and just started a new adventure. So that was a little surprising to me because I really love the Seattle community, and I felt like I was being a bit of a hypocrite being here, being an entrepreneur, taking risks and all that other stuff, but I was doing it from a very safe, nested place. But once I realized that going to a new environment entirely can also unearth a side of myself that I didn't know existed, really lit me up, and I got excited about it. So anyways, I'd love to continue the conversation. Hit me up via the socials and all that good stuff. Thank you for coming.